What happens when one of the most legendary teams in Formula One arrives in the middle of the season without answers and bets everything to a single improvement? Can a rear suspension save Ferrari from an announced debacle? Ferrari's technical commitment for Hungary GP is not a simple aerodynamic improvement or a mid-term update. It is, in practical terms, a critical re-engineering of the rear train of the SF25. This decision was not taken light or driven by a passenger fashion in the paddock. It was the result of weeks, even months, data accumulation, technical frustrations, failed correlation analysis and simulations that were not reflected on the track. And within all that technical storm, the rear suspension was identified as the bottleneck that prevented the car from releasing its true potential. The most delicate point of technical intervention is in suspension geometry. Ferrari chose to reposition the front anchor of the upper arm of the rear suspension, lowering it approximately 30 millimeters. This change, although imperceptible to the naked eye, deeply transforms how the car responds to the dynamic braking, acceleration and passage charges. What in simulation seemed like a marginal improvement, in real terms is a surgical blow on one of the stability axes of the car. With this new disposition, Ferrari's intention is double. First, achieve a more rigid and stable platform, reducing the vertical movement of chassis, especially in variable load areas such as slow curves or lifting changes. Second, stabilize the aerodynamic flow under the bottom of the car, something vital in the era of the soil effect, where small oscillations in the filming height can mean the difference between a dominant car and an inconducible one. But this redesign was not just a matter of geometry. At the structural level, it implied a significant modification in the gearbox housing. To maintain structural integrity, Maranello engineers developed a new rear section in late-generation composite materials, seeking stiffness without penalizing by weight. The anchor points were completely redesigned to resist the new loads generated by the most aggressive behavior of the upper arm. The validation of this modification began in the Mugello circuit, during a private filming day that, in practice, worked as an undercover test. Leclerc and Hamilton shot about 20 laps each, not looking for fast times, but understanding how the car behaved with the new suspension under different height and balance configurations. The data obtained were promising. Less wear of the plank, significant reduction of pitch, and a more stable reading of aerodynamic pressure sensors. The most revealing thing was what happened later in Spa-Francorchamps. There, Ferrari officially introduced the new suspension package. It was not a symbolic test, but a complete implementation under career conditions. In a circuit known for its extreme combination of fast lines and technical curves, Leclerc managed to climb to the podium. The rhythm in long batches improved, and the balance of the car showed a consistency that had not been seen throughout the season. Although Hamilton did not shine at the same level, his feedback was clear. The car was more predictable and allowed to attack more confidently. This modification also generated a change in the way in which the SF25 generates rear aerodynamic load. Having a more stable axis, engineers were able to refine the diffuser and the beam wing section more precision, reducing the drag without compromising traction. This represents a change of philosophy. Ferrari is not simply covering technical gaps. He is reorganizing the bases on which he will build the rest of his developments in the season. In that context, Hungary is the ideal track to put this suspension to the test in the most demanding possible environment. A layout full of slow and stockings with few moments of rest, where any tensile or stability failure is amplified after return. It is the perfect exam but also the most brutal. If the system works, the door will open to a more aggressive development in the front train, on the sides of the ground and in the high-load aerodynamic solutions that Ferrari keeps for the second half of the championship. If you fail, you will question the complete address of the SF25 technical project. The Hungary Grand Prix represents much more than a simple date on the calendar for Ferrari. It is the final judgment of a technical and strategic commitment that has consumed resources, time and hopes. In Hungaroring there is no partial victory or symbolic points. Here, Ferrari faces the need to redefine his competitive narrative for the remainder of the 2025 season. The Magaria circuit, with its intertwined curves, critical traction and few straight breath, becomes the perfect environment, or the most ruthless, to assess whether the new rear suspension meets everything that the simulation data promises. The Hungarian layout is a technical trap for any equipment that does not have a balanced car. With a medium-high aerodynamic load sustained for more than 70% of the return and without natural aerodynamic recovery sectors such as Monza or Spa, the car needs to be efficient and constant in each curve. Balance errors, especially in the back of the car, are exponentially amplified. If the rear suspension of the SF25 fails to maintain the stability in braking such as Curve 1 or the traction at the exit of Curve 14, the pilots will lose tenths that, in Hungary, translate into positions. From the point of view of performance, Ferrari has reasons to have moderate confidence. The improvement in SPA was not accidental. Internal measurements reflect a reduction in the height variation peaks of the car's bottom by more than 40%, a key data in circuits like this, where aerodynamic rebound translates directly into loss of grip. There were also advances in the conservation of rear tires, another chronic weakness of the SF25 in the first races. In particular, in heat conditions where the rear train suffered from overwhelperature after a few laps, the new suspension seems to have better distributed thermal loads, allowing longer steins without abrupt degradation. But it is not just technical behavior. There is a strategic dimension that will be crucial in Hungary. The classification historically has a disproportionate weight in this circuit. Advancing is extremely difficult, and the grille position conditions not only the result of the race, but the tactical decisions in each stint. With a more stable suspension, Ferrari hopes to maximize the potential of the car in Q3, especially in the second attempt with new soft tires. This would allow Leclerc and Hamilton to start at least a basic need for real options to the podium since the second row. Internal, the equipment arrives with self-imposed pressure. Frederic Vasseur has declared that Hungary is the validation point of his technical approach. If the SF25 performance with the new suspension confirms the projections, new pieces will be released for Zandvoort and Monza that are already in the aerodynamic validation phase. If not, the technical department must return to the design board, in the middle of a season still open in the mathematician. But that could be closed in the psychological if McLaren expands its advantage. In the emotional, this weekend also marks a decisive moment for the pilots. Leclerc needs to demonstrate that he can still lead a winning project. He has had flashes of genius but also critical errors, and Hungary is the perfect setting to balance the balance. For Hamilton, each race is an opportunity to justify its risky team change. His evolution has been evident, and in Spa he was more comfortable, but he still lacks that full weekend where car, strategy and execution aligns. A podium here, or even an unlikely victory if the leaders fail, could completely change the narrative of their season. The unknown is served. Ferrari arrives with a technical solution that, on paper, has potential to save the season. But in Formula One, the paper does not earn races. Hungary will be the crucible where the theory with practice will be melted, where the SF25 redesign will have to survive the verdict of the track. If it fails, not only the hope of title will wane. All the architecture of the 2025 project will be questioned and possibly affect the foundations of development by 2026. If triumphs, Ferrari's rebirth could be in this era of McLaren dominance. Everything is at stake. Can a modification in the rear suspension reverse the course of a season that escapes at high speed? At first glance, it would seem one more technical measure, one of many introduced during the calendar. But what Ferrari has done goes far beyond a simple adjustment. It is a frontal commitment, a statement of intentions, and an act of despair measured with surgical precision. The team has focused its entire season on this modification, placing all the technical and strategic chips in an improvement that, if it does not meet what was promised, could collapse the entire objective structure 2025. The most intriguing, however, is not the technical component itself, but what it represents. This suspension is not just an engineering experiment, it is a symbol. A symbol that Ferrari still believes in his project. That there is still a will to fight, to evolve, to correct. Because in an era in which championships are decided from the preseason and the improvement margins are getting smaller, daring to redesign a structural pillar of the car in the middle of the campaign is a bold play that few teams would be willing to execute. And Ferrari has done it. But even if the data in Hungary are positive, not everything will be won. This is only the first stage of a process that will need to be consolidated with more aerodynamic development, improvements in the brake system, a continuous evolution of simulation software, and a perfect runway execution. The reading of the car behavior, the real-time adaptations that the strategists manage to apply during the race, and the synergy that Leclerc and Hamilton can build with the updated car can be as important. Therefore, the great unknown is not whether the suspension will work in technical terms, but if it can rescue the competitive soul of the team. Is it enough to motivate the pilots? To re-fall to the direct fight with McLaren? To show the world that Ferrari is still able to evolve under pressure, to innovate in the midst of chaos? This is where your opinion becomes key. Do you think this suspension will really transform SF25 into a serious contender, or will be remembered as another desperate attempt in an era of frustrations? Is this the solution that Hamilton needed to reconnect with victory? If you are interested in following the deep analysis of every technical detail that arises in the Hungary GP, be sure to be subscribed. Because what happens this weekend can define not only the fate of a season, but the immediate future of one of the most legendary teams in the entire history of Formula One.